Welcome everyone, and today it's all about battles. It's a new mechanic, it's a new type of card that's come out. It's hard to rate. There's a lot going on here. You have to assess the front side and the back side, of course. I have a personal way that I'm going about evaluating these cards, and I wanted to share it with you so that you could hopefully rate and start evaluating battles for yourself. Not only in gameplay, but when you're deck building as well. I think one of the biggest characteristics of a battle is that it is a non-creature spell, and all of the abilities that are printed on the front side happen on ETB, so when it enters the battlefield. This is really important because a lot of the abilities printed on these cards tend to be sorcery or instant type actions, except now we have them on permanents, which means you can flicker it, right? You can also bounce it back to your hand. There's all sorts of shenanigans you can do with permanents that have ETBs. So on the plus side, battles have some pretty stellar ETBs that are normally only found on instants and sorceries. Cool. I like that. How many flicker spells are going to be printed in the set for limited is yet to remain seen. The whole set hasn't been released yet, so I don't know how much you're going to be able to abuse this in limited, but in standard, certainly flickering is going to be a thing with battles. I'm sure there will be ways to transform battles that don't involve actually doing combat damage to it. There are spells and creatures that remove counters from target permanent already printed for the set, so that's definitely going to be a way. There are burn spells that do direct damage to target permanents, including battles. So there should be a lot of options of how to transform battles that don't involve combat damage. But let's ignore the transform part of battles for a minute and talk about deck building and how I look at battles when deciding how to build a deck. When I'm deck building and trying to figure out my ratios of creatures to spells and all that, I'm going to look at these spells and rate them on the front side alone in terms of balancing my deck build out. Okay? If the front side can't help me win, I probably don't want to play it at all, because I'm only going to bank on that front side being a benefit to me. That's the most important rating value of a battle, is that front side ETB. What is it? How good is it? What's the cost? Is it worth it? If the answer is yes, put it in the deck. Fine. But unfortunately, that's not the whole story. We have to understand that there is a lingering value on these cards on top of the initial ETB. How do you value that extra hidden value, right? Not simple. Let's dive into that. How do you evaluate how good a backside is if you don't know what it costs? The only cost you know is I have to remove loyalty counters to get this. But what does that really cost? So here's how I've been thinking about battles, what the real cost is, and how I wrap my head around it. So the real cost of a battle transforming is loyalty X, give your opponent that much life gain. So if the loyalty is 5, the cost is my opponent gains 5 life, because that's 5 life I could have dealt to them to face. And if you're thinking 5 life is nothing, it's a lot. It's a fourth of their life total. That is a lot of life to be giving to your opponent. But it's not that simple, right? If it was only life gain, then, it would be easier to assess. But it's not just that. There's an extra hidden cost here, okay? And that hidden cost is most of the time you're going to be attacking into a battle to transform it. So then you're going to have to tap your creatures, because to attack you have to be tapping unless they have vigilance. So in addition to giving them that much life, you're also agreeing to tap your army or X creatures to transform the battle. Sometimes this is only one creature because it has flying or menace, so it's not a big cost. But sometimes you're going to be tapping your whole entire army, right? Just to attack a battle. That's a much bigger cost. So assessing how many creatures you have to tap in order to transform this is also an important part of the cost. Then there's the cost of how many creatures are they realistically going to be able to kill in blocks. So you might actually be asked to sacrifice a creature in addition to transforming this, yes? So now you're giving them life, you're tapping your army, and you're letting them kill a creature of their choice, or 2 creatures, or 3 creatures, depending on the board state. This is starting to get expensive, right? So you invest all that in, and you transform the battle. Congratulations. You get the backside. Let's say the backside is a creature. Good. The creature comes in untapped. Your opponent's upkeep. Untaps, draws, they remove target permanent. They destroy target permanent. They exile target permanent. They bounce target permanent. You've still paid that other cost. You've still given them, phantom 5 life game. You've tapped all of your creatures. You've even maybe lost creatures. And for what? Something that was easily removed, destroyed. It was a huge risk, and it didn't pay off. So for that reason alone, I think when you look at these battles transforming, you have to assess that cost, yes? And you have to think to yourself, how easily is this removed once it transforms? Does it protect itself? Does it protect other things? There are certain ones that transform that maybe that backside's worth it, right? Because it does protect the rest of your army for the rest of the game. There are certain ones that when it transforms, maybe it can transform every single battle from then on. That's okay too, yes. But also realize that in order to get to a point where you're transforming a battle, I'd say 99% of the time you have to be winning the board state to begin with to be even able to entertain transforming a battle, right? And if you're winning the board state, do you really want to take a turn off to do this? Because taking a turn off, even though you're winning the board state, can sometimes lose you the game, yes? So can you afford, even if you're ahead, to tap all your creatures, give your opponent 5 life just to get this one creature on the board, or this one permanent on the board? Assessing that during gameplay is going to be the biggest difference between great players of this set and players who really struggle with this set. Because that's a huge hidden cost that are in the battles. Am I going to sit here and tell you it's not worth it? No, I'm not going to tell you that. Because I do think sometimes, in some games, it's going to be absolutely worth it to go for the transform. But in a lot of them, I see it not being the right choice. And I can't tell you what's right or wrong unless I was literally at the table with you and I saw your hand and I knew the pace of the game and what was going on in the board state. And so that's just going to be a really tricky thing that you're going to have to learn how to assess. And like I said, the best way to assess it is life gain, number of creatures you have to tap, and how many creatures could you lose. Read it as life gain for my opponent, tap X creatures, lose X creatures, or sacrifice X creatures, and that's how you calculate the right cost. If you can transform a battle without doing that, your cost changes, right? Because the cost can change so dramatically, that makes evaluating a battle card even more complicated. Let's take an example when tapping creatures isn't going to be the cost. So I want to look at Render Inert specifically. So this is a sorcery. It costs you 3 mana, and you can remove up to 5 counters from a target permanent, and you get to draw a card so it replaces itself. This card in particular, if you're playing battles, is going to be really important because it takes away the cost of combat. It takes away all of the tapping you'd have to do, all the risk of losing creatures. It takes away the turn off opportunity. You can still be attacking to face and still get the battle transformed. Something like this becomes a lot better than it reads for that reason alone, and it makes battles a little bit more realistic to put in your deck. More importantly, a card like this can be used even if you're behind to transform a battle. So one of the problems I see with battles is you're not going to transform it unless you're ahead on the board. How do you transform it if you're behind? So far in the set, this is one of the few ways you can transform a battle without you having to be ahead on the board state. So a lot of hidden value in this one sorcery, but if you're playing battles, thinking of ways of how to transform it without having to attack in, probably a top priority if you ever need your battles to transform and flip. Hopefully this conversation gets you started in thinking about battles appropriately. Am I going to be flipping them directly through spells? Am I going to be attacking in to flip them? And knowing that the cost changes based on board states. So assessing this real time is going to be crucial to playing this set well. I think battles will impact limited play. I think the front sides alone are generally pretty good. Some aren't, but a lot of them are pretty good. So getting that flip, getting that extra value, and understanding when is it the right time to try and go get that extra value, and when is it not appropriate, is going to be the key to playing the set well. Because people who can maximize their value out of their battles at the right time during a game will be able to pull ahead. And if you're doing it at the wrong time, you're going to find yourself losing lots of games and falling behind. Every single combat phase, reassess what's your risk and actual cost to flip a battle. And I think if you do that, you'll find yourself flipping battles when you should and leaving them alone when it's right too. I'll see you in my next video for my pre-release guide, and thanks for your support.